I discussed how the bar celebration is among my favorite scenes in the remake. Today, we'll talk about the subsequent chapter, a pensive evening on the top plate of Midgar. It's probably the most eclectic chapter in the game, and does a ton of characterization and development rolled into a genuinely inspired presentation. There will be spoilers for remake and original. Let's start by providing context. After bombing a Mako energy reactor, eco-terrorist cell Avalanche and their hired mercenary Cloud escape the scene. Other than some friction between Cloud and Barrett and some collateral, it was successful. They get back to the Sector 7 slums, and Cloud meets up with his childhood friend and Avalanche member Tifa. She takes the opportunity to introduce him to local friends, merchants, and townsfolk as she shows him around the shantytown with the hopes that he'll stay for a while, work some odd jobs, and ingratiate himself with the community. She goes out of her way to be accommodating, and it's pretty clear she wants Cloud to stay around for a bit. However, his antisocial behavior and disdain for mundane work create awkward situations. Cloud's mercenary behavior frightens Tifa, while her overenthusiastic hospitality annoys him.
Yeah, I'm feeling it a bit too.
Tifa's friend and landlady Marl puts it best.
So when she talks, are you really listening? Thinking about her and her feelings? Or are you just going through the motions?
It's not all bad. There's some ups and downs, and they have some fun chatting over drinks once they get back to Avalanche HQ. But when the conversation takes a serious turn, Tifa confides that the bombing missions disturb her.
I know we have to think big if we're going to make a difference. But not like this. I feel trapped.
If it feels wrong, don't do it.
Cloud's advice does not appear to be helpful, and they just sit in silent discomfort with this intractable space between them. When the rest of the Avalanche members meet up at the hideout, the leader Barrett drops the news that they won't be hiring Cloud for the second bombing run. They say it's because they don't want to depend on outside help, but Barrett is barely concealing his schadenfreude as he asks Cloud to finish his drink and leave while they celebrate the first successful mission. This is the scene I covered previously, where I talk about how camera control conveys the emotion of the scene. Even Tifa, at the end of this long day, maybe a little fed up, joins the rest of the group in celebration and brushes off Cloud. On the other hand, Jessie Raspberry, the bomb technician, promises she'll follow up with him, but Cloud doesn't seem to be getting his hopes up. The second time she brings it up, it almost feels like pity. Eventually, he walks out.
Tifa's got you covered there.
As a friend or as a cook?
Because if you really gotta ask.
Immediately, he encounters some thugs who are looking for Barrett. Cloud seemingly considers snitching for money, but they get aggressive, so he wipes them out. He decides against giving Barrett a warning that he is being hunted.
Not my problem. Lesson 1 for life on the ground floor. Get some rest.
Having never played the original, I didn't expect this. This is him at his most misanthropic. His standoffish behavior may have contributed to the rejection, but given the chance to extend an olive branch, he doubles down on this bad attitude. This establishes Cloud as someone who is incapable of self-reflection or course correction to pursue the friendships and acceptance that he so clearly wants. To his surprise, Jessie is waiting for him with a job offer. After the catastrophic collateral damage from the first bombing mission, she resolves to steal a weaker blasting agent from the next reactor. This entails a visit to her parents' house to steal an ID card and rob a weapons warehouse.
Don't you have a pretty big day ahead of
This job offer achieves at least two basic things. It establishes Jessie as an empathetic person who is committed to limiting civilian damage, and it establishes her as the most inclusive member of the group when it comes to Cloud, making him feel needed where the others excluded him.
A down payment.
Turns out the trains were cancelled due to the, light case of eco-terrorism. Biggs and Wedge, however, surprised the duo with motorbikes, as they guessed from their strange behavior that she wanted to head to her mom's house on the top plate. They're some great friends. Everyone should have pals like them. They head out, and this ridiculous motorcycle sequence plays out. I don't have too much to say, other than it was a blast on my first playthrough. Roach is divisive in the fandom, but I like him as a piece of the world. I'm amused that there's a soldier third class hanging around the Midgar tunnel system challenging people to motorcycle duels. I can only imagine Shinra decided he was just too much of a hassle and left him to his own devices. Well, Cloud defeats Roach, Jesse gives him a hug, and they're zooming along their way to the top plate, the Sector 7 residential area. They disembark the bikes, go out the service entrance, and the adrenaline recedes into serenity.
Here we are, the employee housing district, where they put you when your parents work for Shinra.
They walk towards Jesse's home as the scene juxtaposes two ideas. The first idea, this residential area is peaceful. A district on the top plate that's a total change of pace from the reactor and the slums below, which brings us to our second idea. The Avalanche crew doesn't like it because it's unsustainable. Jesse resents this part of her upbringing.
While their reactors were slowly killing the planet, we were living the good life.
Biggs remarks with some disdain on the socioeconomic angle. In short, it's a relatively wealthy suburb, and Jesse tethers this area to the themes of environmental damage and unsustainability. Never mind the Mako for a second. Look at the wide, sprawling, car-centric roads, highway overpass. This area was designed primarily for cars rather than more sustainable modes of transportation or walking. Judging by the garages and driveways, there's probably parking minimums. Cars are clearly the dominant form of transportation up here, and they likely run on Mako. I hate to imagine what rush hour looks like just to get a spot in the Shinra parking garage. Now, if we take a more macroscopic view, this handful of houses takes up about as much land as the Sector 7 or 5 slums below, despite housing only a fraction of the people because this area is single-family zoned. You can see the Mako tubing all over the background, supplying each house with power. This is likely inefficient. Real-world data indicates that housing density has an inverse relationship with carbon footprint per capita due to inefficient heating, cooling, insulation. You can imagine how single-family homes have high surface area to volume ratio, contributing to leakage, as well as higher transport emissions associated with urban sprawl. The same principles of efficiency should by all means apply to Mako consumption in this fictional world, so these well-off suburbs are likely among the most disproportionate offenders. As many fans have noted, Midgar's plate design has the wealthy upper class literally suspended above the slums. We could comment on the excesses of the elite Shinra executives, but that's low-hanging fruit and not particularly interesting. Instead, this chapter of the remake gives us details about the semi-luxurious lifestyles and urban design of the middle to middle upper class areas, and there's enough here to suggest that they're a huge part of the problem. Now, getting back to our regularly scheduled house robbery, the crew meets up outside Jesse's mom's house.
Still leaves the lights on every night. For the girl who only comes home once every other blue moon. Mom's an old-fashioned type like that.
Think she'll make us pizza? Her Midgar special?
She's quite the cook. Quick to whip up finger-licking food even if you drop by in the dead of night.
And she loves guests who ask for seconds or thirds. Okay, let's head in. Cloud, you know what to do. Why don't you wait around the corner over there?
Okay.
It's a shame you won't get to try the Midgar special. You would have really liked it.
The trio go in to greet Miss Raspberry, while Jesse's narration relays instructions for Cloud. He stands by the corner, waiting for the signal.
Think you can do that for me?
It's a little reminiscent of the bar scene, in that he's missing out on festivities. All he has is a wandering cat for company, but the difference is that he has a job this time.
Door when the coast is clear. The signal will be obvious.
The signal turns on. He walks in the back door. Cloud recalls Jesse's instructions upon each new step of the operation.
You'll find a room.
This pre-narration technique is common enough in heist movies, but I particularly dig its use in this gameplay scene. It conveys instruction with gentle camera panning synced to her voice. much better than obtrusive UI. It also sets the scene and builds the mood to a palpable feeling that hangs over the rest of this journey this night. Her mentally reciting the instructions rather than, for example, using live walkie-talkie contributes to the loneliness and suspense. In the event something goes wrong, you feel Cloud may have to adapt on the fly. It gives seamless transition while maintaining the feeling that we are an intruder. On the characterization level, the asynchronous narration uses the melancholic vibe of the scene to hint that there are raw, personal reasons she doesn't want to be here in person or over the radio during the theft. Instead, she's in the dining room, chit-chatting. Meanwhile, her narration describes how this is a deception. Even though he's missing out on dinner, Cloud is in the know here. As Cloud enters the bedroom, the camera angle changes to look at him from the bed, with IV equipment on the edge of the frame, cluing our brains in a second before the reveal itself. Ah, so that's what this tone has been building up to. Her dad is in a coma.
I need you to grab his Shinra ID card. And yeah, I know I should do it myself, but... but I honestly don't think I'm up to it. Just do this for me, okay?
Well, now we see Jesse's motivation for hiring Cloud. It's imminently understandable that this is a violation unto her dad that she doesn't want to perform herself. On the other hand, there's a solid mercenary she's fond of who happens to be looking for a job because the rest of the crew has given him the cold shoulder. 2 birds, 1 stone. It wasn't present in OG FF7, so you might think that this whole job was just an excuse to create more gameplay content. Okay, on some fundamental level, that's all a video game design. But I'm referring to flat side characters that exist solely to give the player a hoop to jump through. Horizon Zero Dawn comes to mind, a game that I like but frequently use as a punching bag. Relatively minor spoilers for a side quest. Consider the girl from the Hunter Lodge who is at odds with the Chief Sunhawk. She wants to usurp him to honor her fallen family and asks the protagonist Aloy, a new recruit, to hunt on her behalf to improve both of their standings. But throughout the quest, it feels like Aloy is doing all the work. Talana only tags along in the final battle, and it never really feels like her initiative. You might argue she was trying to show leadership by delegating work or staying back to protect people. That might have worked if it acknowledged that Talana is handling some indispensable leadership role, but frankly, she comes off as a freeloader riding off Aloy's success. To me, this feels like a particularly flimsy excuse for a side quest narrative, and an unflattering example of a side character whose agency is being cannibalized by the player. So, is Jessie ceding her narrative agency to the player in Cloud? Maybe a little, but she's doing so as an act of characterization, as it establishes her sensitivity to her dad/family situation as well as her conscientiousness towards Cloud's feeling of estrangement. There's a lot of narrative mileage from multiple angles, and I think it makes for a motivated blend of storytelling and gameplay. It also brings me to the next topic, her backstory, which is expressed through environmental exploration. Back to the scene of the heist. As we walk around the room, the player likely notices the photos from Jessie's childhood. It's down to the player whether to pause to take a glance at them or stick strictly to the job. That said, Jessie's narration doesn't tell the player where the ID card is, so exploration and searching are naturally incentivized. Again, this pre-narration technique and what it tastefully omits are so much more organic than an objective marker. I suppose this explore at your own leisure design has a trade-off. There's risk that the player just chooses to ignore everything. But I also think the possibility of this failure mode makes the experience more special for those who choose to engage. I know I did, and the combination of sneaking, exploring, and observing the environment made for a surprisingly memorable scene, if just for how poignant and vulnerable it felt. I searched the desk and saw some photos from her childhood. We find a note on the ground, and we are presented with the choice to read it or not. Do we care about Jessie enough to be curious about her past? Do we put it back and ignore it out of respect for her privacy? Plot-wise, this choice is inconsequential, but who cares about plot right now? Rather, it interactively characterizes Cloud, a test of whether he is curious about this person who has expressed so much interest in him, at the trade-off of being a little intrusive.
Looking forward to seeing you both there.
The details and decorations in the room raise some natural questions. How did she go from getting a big break in acting to becoming an eco-terrorist? Did her dad's sickness have something to do with it? Cloud doesn't explicitly ask these questions out loud, but I think the nature of the interactive medium allows us to assume Cloud is wondering these basic questions just by virtue of synchrony with the player. It's not the particular backstory that's oh so special, it's the framing, the organic discovery, and the explore at your own pace, if you want to, that is what makes this special. Now, beyond her backstory, this exploration also characterizes Jessie. She is placing a lot of faith and responsibility in Cloud by allowing him to see her past and father, and in turn, this is the first time since the bombing run that Cloud feels invested in the job. Look at how he takes a last, long glance before leaving the room. By the time Jessie and the others join up with him after dinner, the experience has changed Cloud's relation to the gang. Although Cloud initially appeared to be excluded, the sham dinner and concurrent theft actually marginalized Miss Raspberry to integrate Cloud into the in-group. The trust and instructions that Jessie gave to Cloud allowed him, by proxy of the player, to piece together an understanding of her better than even her own mother, who was oblivious as to what Jessie even does for a living, let alone her motivations. It's probably not very nice of Jessie to exclude her mom like that, but it's in line with Jessie's resentment for aspects of her upbringing and her mom's condescending attitude toward her cover story as a stagehand. While I have no reason to doubt that Jessie still loves her parents, her mom personifies unsustainable, oblivious suburbia, while her dad personifies the human cost of the system, and they are incompatible with Jessie's radical ideology. Considering that she was once pursuing a career as some sort of glamorous stage actress, and now holds disdain for luxury, there's probably some kernel of self-hate or implied regret that she wishes she found her epiphany earlier, before the accident. I don't think Jessie really trusts her parents, who she sees as part of the system, but she does trust Cloud now. The heist has created an understanding between the two of them. Jessie takes the ID and tells Cloud and the others to work on the diversion part of the plan, while she sneaks ahead. This gives Cloud, Biggs, and Wedge some time to chat. Biggs brings up Jessie's sick dad, and to Biggs' surprise, Cloud says he wants to hear the details.
Yeah.
Mako poisoning. Happened while Jessie was doing a show with the Gold Saucer. But what do you care?
No. I want to hear it.
Jessie always wanted to be an actress. Worked her ass off for years. Until finally she caught a break. Top billing. Parents were thrilled. And then, right before opening night,
Her dad had an accident.
collapsed from overwork. And in the worst possible place, Mako's storage. Lay there half a day before someone found him. Been like that ever since. No change whatsoever. And that's what got her into planetology. And led her to seek out Avalanche. How far we've come.
Jessie's got a theory about it. Thinks her dad's spirit is stuck now, between his body and the heart of the planet. So if we don't shut down the reactors soon...
He'll get caught up in the flow and poof. What's so funny?
Just that I understand how you feel. Unlike most of the time.
His emotional investment is definitely growing. He listens to Biggs talk about their ideology. Although not very talkative, Cloud's really listening to them now. This is the point where the other members become more than just a crew. This conversation with Biggs might be the first direct and genuine interaction Cloud has had without his persona getting in the way. Just compare this conversation with Biggs to the first conversation with Barrett about the planet.
Damn straight I do.
Get help.
They also ask Cloud to keep their conversation private, as Jessie is known for being a bit aggressive about her dad's story.
She gets punchy.
It's all pretty lighthearted, and it is progress. I should also mention that the side of herself she shows to Cloud seems to be different from the side she shows Biggs and Wedge. I get the impression she code switches quite a bit. Now, I want to just mention that I don't think Jessie's backstory about her dad is particularly deep. It's just how it's being used. It gives Cloud a chance to genuinely engage and ask questions and show some genuine connection to the rest of these people. Even when Jessie's not around, her job provides the structure for Cloud to take small steps and make bonds.
Back to the heist at hand, the gang discusses how to cause the most commotion to give Jessie some cover.
First, we climb high enough to get a van.
As Biggs explains the diversion plan, Cloud's eyes start wandering to the sky that reminds him of the starry night when he snuck out to meet Tifa by the water tower in Nibelheim.
Hey,
They chat about the future.
so,
Cloud's insecurities show themselves even this early on, as he says he's not going to Midgar for work, like the other boys, but is going to become an elite soldier like Sephiroth. There's a barely concealed undertone of wanting to change himself into someone impressive enough to receive her affection. He's this close to saying something totally lame.
But I'm not like them. I'm not going just to look for work. I'm gonna be a soldier. The best of the best. Like Sephiroth.
The great war hero, huh?
His idolship of Sephiroth and the soldier program are significant in the context of this warehouse heist. He likes how both the camaraderie and the job are shaping up this evening in the top plate, especially the importance and profundity of the job. But there's definitely some frustration here, likely wishing he could do some of this with Tifa instead. Because even though he kinda likes the trio, it's clear Tifa is the most important person to him.
We're older, and you're a famous soldier.
Tifa had to make a strange promise about coming to her rescue someday like a hero. It's hard to say whether this water tower conversation is entirely honest, as Cloud already has this insecurity complex, and Tifa eggs him on with a slightly childish promise. But Cloud certainly views this memory with great fondness and nostalgia.
Fine. I promise.
Back in the present, he gives off this look of frustration, and then his thoughts wander to his time with Tifa at the bar and her conflicting feelings about Avalanche's mission.
If we're going to make a difference, but not like this. I feel trapped.
Cloud clenches his fist. His lingering on these memories suggests that he feels he hasn't been living up to that promise, and that these emotionally vulnerable moments are intractable for him. Cloud comes back to present. In one of the biggest action sequences so far, Cloud runs the Shinra gauntlet as Biggs and Wedge provide support from afar. The affair caps off with Roach popping up and demanding a sword duel, in which Cloud triumphs. At some point, Wedge throws himself in harm's way to get Cloud to safety, and Biggs tells him to respect that choice and run. They all end up making it out thanks to the intervention of another Avalanche cell, and they get a moment to catch their breath and clown around. Jesse even notices Cloud breaking character and laughing a bit before he clams up, but progress is progress. He probably felt pretty good for a moment there, even if he doesn't want to let others hear him laugh. They have a bit of a group heart-to-heart, and finally, they parachute down to the bottom plate. Mission success. When they get back to Sector 7, he sends Wedge home safely.
Don't fall for it.
You lost me.
Cloud checks to make sure Jesse got home safely, who invites him over for the next evening.
Depends. Mind coming over tomorrow night?
We have this situation where Jesse unironically thinks of Cloud as a cool soldier, which might be contributing to his insecurity.
Only if you promise to come back tomorrow night.
This direct attention seems to overwhelm him. Cloud either equivocates or says no.
No promises, but I'll think it over.
Anyways, I don't know how common knowledge this is, but you can actually swing around and talk to Biggs as well. He thanks Cloud for taking care of everyone and runs through the plan in his head, getting a little caught up in his thoughts. It's actually Cloud who reassures Biggs and gets him to settle down. Look at his body language as he puts his arm forwards. It's this mixture of reservedness and empathy, which is more than anything we've seen from Cloud up to this point.
Finally done with the evening, Cloud turns in for the night. To his surprise, Tifa visits him. The conversation starts with some awkward small talk, but then Tifa comes out and says what's on her mind, hoping he's planning to stay around Midgar. Instead of the crude responses he was giving throughout the afternoon around the slums, Cloud demonstrates his newfound mindset and brings up their old promise from when they were children and asks if she wants to talk. It's plain to see that his memory about the water tower has been sticking around in his mind. Tifa is a little bit surprised at this remark, but she likes the change in attitude and notices that he's been warming up. Cloud gets a little flustered, but Tifa is genuinely delighted. Happy to finally have a conversation where they're listening rather than talking past each other, she says she's really glad that he's here in Midgar. They don't end up talking too much more because it seems Tifa stayed up late to wait for Cloud to return from the top plate, but they part the night on good terms.
It's pretty late, huh? Night then.
Good night, Tifa.
We've dissected the individual events throughout Chapter 4, and now it's time to synthesize and evaluate. Cloud was feeling rejected after some mixed efforts in Sector 7, but as Jessie extended an olive branch to him for her own reasons, Chapter 4 is the first step of change. He's learning to show interest and get along with his crew. He developed some genuine rapport with Biggs, who is one of my favorite characters with his earnest masculinity. Wedge is a little underdeveloped because they over-rely on food jokes. For once, I would just like to have a fat character in media who isn't just the butt of every one of these jokes. But he does demonstrate Cloud's importance to the team when he pushes him out of the line of fire. And as for Jessie, the star of the chapter, we get a vignette that doubles as both a microcosm of the environmental themes and a story of her estrangement resulting from her family tragedy. I think they do great character work on top of this, but notice that a lot of Jessie's development was done when she wasn't directly on screen, as she usually had to be somewhere else as part of the mission. This indirect characterization tracks with her relationship with Cloud. Indirectly, she's conscientious and inclusive, helping him make friends and feel like part of the gang, but in person she's so brazen that Cloud finds her off-putting. Her character is somewhat polarizing for the fandom, but at least I think her mission more than earns its place in Cloud's journey. The other significance of this topside journey is how it gets Cloud to initiate some reflection on his friendship with Tifa. Their reunion was spent on a lot of superficialities and seemingly pointless jobs, while Jessie's mission had a level of gravitas and profundity that he's drawn towards. We see that this insecurity complex and desire for significance stem back to his childhood, but he has not yet grappled with his fundamental flaws. None of the people or events he's experienced so far has challenged him on that foundational level, and his core insecurity is still intact by the end of Remake Part 1. But this experience does serve as a big first step in course-correcting his interpersonal behavior, and inspiring him to put some conscientiousness towards his interactions with Tifa. Now, players who view the remake through the lens of OG FF7 might feel that the adventure with Jessie, Biggs, and Wedge encroaches on Cloud's friendship with Aerith, who was known for drawing him out of his shell in the original. I do think that the Avalanche trio slightly cannibalizes this exclusivity, but that's perfectly okay. They're not stepping stones, it's just that in this fleshed out remake, Cloud's growth is multi-causal. His time with the Avalanche gang teaches him a bit about how to fit in, but his time with Aerith is transformative because she is uniquely adept at cutting through his persona. We'll talk about that next time. As for why I liked this chapter so much, this was approximately when the game clicked for me on my first playthrough. I had a blast with the novelty and sheer testosterone of the motorcycle duel, and I was taken aback by the sudden crawl of the pacing. It really captured the feeling of returning to a suburb. The presentation of the ID card heist left a strong impression, and that palpable but unspoken emotion permeated through the entire night. When I think about my favorite games, it's usually not the action or spectacle that comes to mind, but the sequences that bring out the essence of the story using organic gameplay. The operating room in The Last of Us, the Field of Flowers in Metal Gear Solid 3, the nuke in Call of Duty 4. Final Fantasy VII Remake is not a great game, and nothing in it quite reaches those heights. But the chapter and the ID heist in particular clear the bar of weaving complex emotional tones into the interactivity of the scene. I think that even some of the best games of the PS4 generation didn't quite achieve that. Not God of War, maybe Red Dead 2, The Witcher 3 I think managed it okay. But the scene in question in the remake isn't perfect. Wedge was underdeveloped and the dialogue was too verbose. But I really want to stress that the amount of time the devs dedicated to a slow, pensive chapter is commendable, since we all know people love to complain about slow sequences, but this is the good kind of slow. Observation, introspection, change. It really didn't matter to me that this side chapter didn't advance the plot because it did something sublime with the characters, themes, and just overall emotion, and it was around this point that the remake won me over.